Yeah, we got a lot going on. Man, it was a weird. I was prepping the news, and I was like, it's a slow news day. And then it turned into like, well, I still have a lot of articles to cover, though some of them are really quick. But yeah, it was a little bit of a slow news day, but some really interesting things. So I think, for this one, we might want to just kind of have a little more free form at the end, or just double down on any of the topics that you think might be really interesting.
Well, definitely. And I know there were a couple of articles from yesterday that we did not get a chance to cover as well. So there's a lot of news going on this week, even though it might
Mhm.
be a slow news day today. So, yeah,
Yeah.
welcome to everybody who's tuning in and listening.
All right. So as when we go into the countdown, we can start pinging people up, and of course, if anybody wants to join the conversation or just prep themselves, you can raise your hand, and we'll bring you on up. And it's Thursday. We made it almost through the week, and then tomorrow is the weekend review. All right, we're going into the countdown. How you doing? Welcome to the Music News Power Hour on the Music Industry City Broadcast Network. And today we are going to talk about Facebook. Revenue up 48%. Apple Music launches city charts. What does the music union mean for the industry? Podcast paywall wars, and live streaming has a problem. Plus, it's your daily Spotify update. It is Thursday. We have made it almost all the way through the week and getting ready for tomorrow's Friday weekend review. We have a lot to discuss, but first, let's welcome my co host, Eli Window. Eli,
Hi, Peter. How are you?
good to see you. How are you doing?
It's good to see you too. I'm doing really well. I'm doing really well. Let's go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover today. Before we get started, we just want to let you know that the format of the show is that we're going to read out some headlines at the top of the show. Feel free to raise your hand if you have a short comment that you'd like to share as we read out headlines, and we'll open the room in the back half of the show for discussion. Let's get started. Today, in memory, we remember from April 29th, 1993, guitarist producer Mick Ronson died on this date of liver cancer, aged 46, in memory. On this day, 1997, American bass guitarist Keith Ferguson died of liver failure at the age of 50, due in part to a nearly 30-year addiction to heroin. He was a member of the Fabulous Thunderbirds, in memory. Moving on, birthdays today, the one, the only, the iconic Duke Ellington, born April 29th, 1899. Also born on this day, an incredible icon of the music industry. In 1933, Willie Nelson was born on this day. Also born this day, 1946, American soul singer, songwriter, record producer, Lorraine Chandler. She was one of the first Black female songwriters and producers. Also born this day, 1968, Carney Wilson of Wilson Phillips, daughter of Beach Boy Brian Wilson. Happy birthday. Also born this day, 1981, Tom Smith, bass guitarist with English rock band The Editors. Happy birthday. Moving on this day in history, 1976, after a gig in Memphis, Bruce Springsteen took a cab to Elvis Presley's Graceland home and then proceeded to climb over a wall. A guard took him to be another cranked fan and apprehended Springsteen. And on this day, 2003, a $5 million lawsuit against former Creedence Clearwater Revival leader John Fogerty was dismissed after a personal injury lawyer claimed that Fogerty suffered hearing loss in his left ear after attending a concert. The judge said the plaintiff assumed the risk of hearing damage when he attended the concert in 1997. I'm sorry, that was a fan who alleged that he assumed hearing loss after attending a Fogerty concert. And the judge, again, did say that the plaintiff assumes the risk of hearing damage when he attended the concert, and that's part of buying the ticket. And that's it for this day in history. Back over to you, Peter. Oh, I can't hear you. Can anybody else hear Peter?
Yeah, how about now?
Oh, I
First and
hear you now. That's great.
yeah,
Awesome. That's great to hear you.
yeah. First and foremost,
I couldn't hear him. I've been to too many
earplugs.
concerts.
Wear earplugs. Exactly,
You
Elliot. Yes.
you also went to the Fogerty concert? Oh no.
Uh, Class action lawsuit right there. Here's something really interesting. When Duke Ellington's birthday, it's like I feel like I'm getting old now when you hear people that you've listened to their music while you're growing up, and it's like born in the 19th century. When you hear, and it's like you're getting to that age where centuries are crossing over, and it's kind of like I don't know if that makes me feel older or just like just older. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it definitely makes me feel older, but you know what? So does understanding the years that people who are allowed to drink right now were born, the drinking age and learning when legal drinkers were born kind of depresses me as well. So I don't know what to say.
well, this is the easiest year for a bouncer. All you have to do is, as long as the ID says 2000, you're good to go. All right, so let's get into the news. All right, we have a lot to talk about today, but just go how this works is we read key sections from articles for the first 20, 30 minutes so that we feel that, might be good for open for discussion. And then for the remainder of the hour, we have an open roundtable. So if there's something that you want to chime in about during one of the reads, if you have a quick statement on that, feel free to raise your hand. And then the roundtable is like if you want to talk about any of the articles or if there's something in the news that we missed and you wanted to bring to the table. All right, so let's get to it. Starting off, and this is Musically, and this is the Facebook Q1 revenues grew 48% year on year to $26.2 billion. So that is just one quarter is $26.2 billion. Here's more evidence that the biggest ad-supported tech companies are over their COVID-19 bumpiness from 2020. Facebook published its Q1 2021 financial results last night, revealing that its revenues grew by 48% year on year to $26.7 billion. That included a 46% rise in advertising revenue to $25.44 billion, thanks to the number of ads delivered by growing 30% year on year and a 30% increase in the average price paid per advert. Facebook ended Q1 with 1.88 billion daily active users and 2.85 billion monthly active users, up by 8% and 10% respectively, with 2.72 billion daily active users of its family of products, including Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger. Talking of Facebook's wider products, its other revenue grew by 146% year on year to $732 million. The company didn't break that down, but it's a strong hint that its Oculus Quest 2 VR headset is selling like the clappers. Quote, the big piece here is that the Quest 2 is doing quite well, CEO Mark Zuckerberg told analysts. Quote, I don't want to overstate it because I think compared to platforms that are kind of large, massively successful today, it's still obviously on the small end, but there's been a very real inflection in terms of adoption and engagement that we're seeing with the Quest 2. What's interesting about this, for anybody that has purchased or is looking to purchase a Quest 2, the Quest 2 requires that you have a Facebook account. So if you have deactivated your account, you have to reactivate it. If you totally expunged your Facebook account, you have to create a new one. Now, Messenger is also tied into Facebook. So it's tied into the Oculus. So you can get your messages in Oculus or just on Messenger or on your phone. So, these numbers, is it going to be, if like somebody's on Quest, is that considered a Messenger user if they just make one Messenger? So it's really going to be interesting how, we'll never know and how are they going to start advertising in the Oculus? I have a feeling that's coming, unfortunately, that you're going to be in your home space. And then all of a sudden, it's like that episode of Black Mirror where the people are in their kitchen and just an ad would show up on the wall. And, you're going to need a new set of ad blockers. All right. Moving on, there is Apple Music. So this is in Music Week. And again, if you want to read along at home with all the articles, you can find the links in the show notes, which is at musicindustrycity.com. Click on the Clubhouse Information Center banner, and then you can access the show notes there. It's in a Google spreadsheet. We add them every day. And again, so that leads us to when we go to the Friday Weekend Review. If there's something that you saw and you wanted to bring it back to the table, feel free to do so. Moving along, Apple Music highlights local music tastes with city charts. And this was talked about for a little while, but now they have launched city charts to spotlight the music making waves in over 100 cities around the world. While standard charts rank music based on simply number of plays, Apple Music City charts combine plays and additional signs of local popularity to rank the top 25 songs gaining momentum with listeners locally. In the announcement, Apple Music said that City Charts, quote, brings both global and local artists to the forefront of a new destination for music discovery. They list some of the UK cities available, including Birmingham, Glasgow, Liverpool, London, and Manchester. Updated daily city charts are featured in Apple Music's charts page and are accessible via the browser search pages, or just ask Siri to play a local city chart. Users can also add their favorite city charts to their library, download them, and share them. The launch also included release of some other features for Apple Music subscribers, and that is motion for artist details pages. Artists can now bring their personality to life in Apple Music by adding their own moving images to artist detail pages. Lyric sharing: share favorite lyrics using messages, Facebook, and Instagram stories. Lyrics link back to the exact moment in the song, and subscribers can play the snippet and messages without leaving the conversation. I kind of find that interesting, really cool. All right, so there's record label pages, which is the latest and most popular releases from hundreds of record labels, and search for record labels. Search now shows record labels and suggestions and top results for relevant searches. You can explore other albums from favorite artists, favorite labels. Albums released from selected labels now have a link to the record label page just below the track and a library made for you. So Apple Music has added a shortcut to find personal mixes and replay playlists. I really like the labels suggestion. I mean, this goes back to when labels were brands. You talk about Def Jam being a brand, Tommy Boy a brand. Like, labels were brands, and they had merch, and the logo was so well known. It's like, and especially like also in dance music and for DJs, a lot of times people just like, oh, a new track out on this label, I'm just going to pick it up. Eli, what about you? Any thoughts on?
Yeah, I think Brett and I are both, we both have great ideas. We're both trying to be polite to each other, and that's why
Oh,
neither of us has said anything yet. But I just wanted to say that, yeah, that definitely there was a time in history when if you purchased something that came from a label, you definitely had an idea of the aesthetic and the flavor, the palette that you were going to take on when you listened to that record and took it on board, put it through your ears, and that's to me, that was a very special era. But Brett, I know you had something to say. Please go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, as someone who uses Apple Music, I think the label idea would be fantastic. The only label-specific playlist I've seen just through that prior to was the Motown collection, or Motown Essentials, which in that case, it's such a legendary label over the years, and it has just a plethora of catalog. But for me, just having labels now have that idea to build a playlist and pretty much have a virtual version of, hey, here's the little sampler that you would get while at a festival booth that you're either getting a download card for and not actually going through with it. I think it's such a beneficial platform to actually market some of
mhm.
these smaller bands on a label, to
That's
have that
I like
name
that.
recognition of the label.
Right on.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
game changer. We used to do when I worked for Aware, which was a frequent upstreamer to Columbia, for example. We used to put out Aware compilations, and people would just go nuts for them. I mean, we got rid of them in seconds, and some of them have even won awards and things for just being these great compilations. And ever since then, there hasn't really been a very clear transfer for that compilation, label specific compilation through the streaming services, and also these locales, this sort of city, the local options that they were talking about in the beginning. That's going to be a game changer for independent artists because they could actually gain traction.
Right on.
So
Yeah.
I actually
Hey,
wanted to.
Brett, can I just interrupt? You're on speakerphone. It is very difficult to hear you. If you can go to a regular, like, just get it closer.
Yeah, Brett, you're so quiet. I wish I could hear you a little bit better. I agree with Peter. I wish I could hear you better than I
Sorry, one
can.
sec.
All right. So while we're doing that, we can also bring this back up later. I want to move on to the next article here because we covered this just a few weeks ago, and it's been ongoing, and I know we brought it up a few times. This one is in Pitchfork, and it's what does secretly groups union mean for the indie music industry? So the article is it's an in-depth article, and again, you can go to the show notes at musicindustrycity.com, click on the Clubhouse Information Center graphic, and find that here so you can read the entire thing. But it starts off at a time when independent labels are battling for market share with major label consolidation and do-it-yourself distribution alike. The day-to-day employees of one of the biggest U.S. indies are now fighting for changes in the workplace. In late March, around 85 staffers across various positions and locations at Secretly Group, the label family that includes Secretly Canadian, Jaguar, Dead Oceans, and a bunch other, announced that they were forming Secretly Group Union. And some of the artists that are not in the union, though some have voiced their support publicly. The workers said that they unionized for fair pay, better work-life balance, and structures to improve diversity. 2 days later, the label's leadership applauded the efforts as, quote, a positive step for our company and the industry writ large, suggesting that both parties might be able to bypass the contentiousness that often comes with negotiating a labor contract. So, in a statement to Pitchfork on behalf of Secretly Group's management, Dead Ocean's founder Phil Wolof said their response is part and parcel with the label's group's forward-thinking ethos. Quote, once we received SU's initial letter, we found that a lot of the available resources framed union bargaining in adversarial terms, which is just not how we view our colleagues or the labor movement in general. Statement reads, instead, we are going into this with a hopeful and open mind. So the article goes on as they saying, given traditional indie labels' ideals about fighting for a voice, it may be surprising that indie label unions haven't taken root previously. John Logan, a labor professor at San Francisco State University, once worked for the legendary UK indie Rough Trade, says it's a positive sign that Secretly Group gave the union voluntary recognition so quickly, avoiding an early skirmish. Quote, you don't have to feel that your employer really sucks in order to want to have a union and a voice at work and the security of having certain things written into a contract. Continues, a lot of people who work at independent record labels probably like the companies that they work for. That's part of the reason they want to work there. It remains to be seen whether the consular mood will continue when Secretly Group's management and Secretly Group unions sit down to hammer out the details of their first contract, which often takes years, if at all. He also adds that under U.S. law, employers have no obligation to come to an agreement. So, this going to change? There's a lot more into this article. They talk about Secretly Group Union is organizing with the Office and Professional Employees International Union, Local 174, which counts as members the office staff at Universal Music Group as well, and various film and TV employees at companies such as Warner Brothers, Disney's, and Sony. Local 174 pushes for better standards in the workplace, equitable wage scales, employer-paid medical insurance that includes spouses and dependents. So the local one, they go on, Local 174 will be pushing hard to improve the standards in the music industry. For now, the Secretly Group Union seems to be taking the process one step at a time. Last week, union members celebrated management legally finalizing its voluntary recognition for the union, meaning that the union and their bosses reached an agreement on such matters which workers are eligible to participate in the unit. Next up, the organizing committee member tells Pitchfork the union will be selecting its bargaining committee and working with members to specify their own concerns and start tackling ways to address them. The world of indie music will be watching. Something interesting. It's, is this going to be one of those we wait and see? And then are others going to jump on a similar bandwagon? And, is this good? Is it not good? Any thoughts on that? All right, so let's moving on to then from the indies to the majors. This one is Sony. Says it is aggressively pursuing music acquisition. So this has been, last 2 years we've seen tons of acquisitions, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. But, we're going to see how long this wave lasts. Sony Music Group's strong calendar Q1 results were revealed today, including a $1.3 billion recorded music revenue haul in the 3 months to the end of March, an 11% year-over-year jump in global publishing revenues. Meanwhile, Sony Music Group's recent acquisition drives continue apace under the leadership of Rob Stringer. In the past 3 months, they have announced 3 industry-shaking deals. On February, it announced the $430 million acquisition of AWOL and Cobalt neighboring rights. Earlier this month, it announced the $255 million acquisition of Brazil's biggest domestic label, Som Livre. And in March, Sony Music Publishing announced the buyout of Paul Simon's catalog for an undisclosed but definite 9-figure sum. If the Paul Simon deal came in anywhere near $300 million, and we're not saying it did, but the $300 to $400 million buyout of Bob Dylan's catalog by Universal surely makes it possible. It would mean Sony committing the best part of $1 billion across 3 music deals in the first 4 months of 2021 alone. All right, so yesterday, the executive deputy president and CEO of Sony Music Group delivered some strong words to investors about what Sony Music Group has up its sleeve for the months ahead. Quote, "We are steadily improving our ability to discover and nurture artists and continually create hits, and we aim to continue to increase our profitability going forward," while noting that both the AWOL deal and the Som Livre buyout were agreed but yet to clear regulatory approval. All right, so it goes on, and then, over in Mexico this week, they have made a big announcement. It's agreed to acquire the music catalog of Mexican regional label and management company Remix Music for an undisclosed fee. Monterey and U.S.-based Remix's repertoire includes recordings by local hit makers. I'm not going to try to pronounce all their names because I'm going to do a terrible job. You can read the article. And they say, quote, "We are happy that the acquisition of the diverse and rich catalog of Remix Music, the result of the successful work that Domingo Chavez and Germaine Chavez have carried out over the past few years." So there's a lot more about this. It's just another interesting area of just watching what's going on with these acquisitions. It's a consolidation. We have seen this consolidation of the industry before. It seems like every decade or so we get a new wave of consolidation. Anybody, seen, any thoughts on, the effects it has, if there's any ripple effects or, are involved in any way in all this? All right, moving on to
I want to know. I want to know what they're doing. What are they doing with all of these? In the past, like you said, Peter, these things every 10 years they'd acquire them, and we'd find out pretty soon what there was a format change or that something was being sold or a distribution angle that they were working. But I'm just really I'm sort of sitting on the edge of my seat, wondering why suddenly all these catalogs are being sold and acquired, and what the sort of secret mission is behind them.
Well,
Well, for me, if I
go on,
sorry,
Brett.
Peter, if I could jump in, the most interesting catalog sale to date for me is the Beach Boys sale to Irving Hazoff, where that in itself, the working relationship between Mike Love's version of the Beach Boys and Brian Wilson as the solo artist, and his touring unit, that is a band, just with the publishing history that they've had, just between the two drastics and the infighting, where that they somehow came together and were able to sell off their entire catalog. And also the IP on top of that, which for me, it's like when that news came out, because there's a couple other things also moving as well, because their 60th anniversary's coming up as well as a band, and I think whenever post-COVID is, they're gonna do another reunion tour like they did for the 50th. But then they're also talking about doing like Jimmy Buffett's like Margarita style branding in Denver. But that, for me, out of all the catalog sales so far, that's the most interesting one, just because of the weight of the deal, and then just whatever was proposed, just to. Because kind of to your point, Angela, where it's like, what are these? What's in it for the companies outside of just the revenue stream of just such a big catalog, of all this stuff. But for me, that's the most interesting one to date.
Well, going to in the past, there we say, if we look at BMG. Let's say like BMG and KKR, you talk about Bertelsmann, it's like Sony and like all that action that was happening, over a decade ago, and then they sold it off. They unloaded it, and guess what? Now BMG and KKR are on their second wedding. So, and now BMG is saying like, well, KKR has a lot of assets. I forgot the number. They were just saying 1 billion. That's their initial starting point, but they have, it's like almost like a blank check. They're talking. I think they have hundreds of millions in assets, billions in assets under management. So therefore, it's like they're looking at, the model of hypnosis, and we also just saw Downtown. Downtown has been on a acquisition spree as well, and now they just unload. I mean, Downtown started as a publishing company, and they just unloaded their entire catalog to Concord, which Concord's been on a spree as well. And Concord's been on a spree. Actually, Concord's been on a spree, has been buying for a good part of the decade, and so now what Downtown was saying is that they want to go more into the music services, because they have the distribution platforms, they have much more in there, and it's just something that they was like, hey, we can unload this catalog, and catalogs are sexy right now. Catalogs have longevity in them. It's that, a long tail. Does the long tail come into effect? I mean, I'm no expert on any of that by any means. So if there are some people that, deal with catalogs and, valuations, feel free to raise your hand and jump in. But here's the other thing about the sales that are going on now, and some of these people. I mean, Crosby sold. I mean, a lot of these artists looking at this period that I can't make any money. There's no revenue from live, and they're also legacy artists. They're getting up there in their age. Like, well, how much more money is this going to make me per year? So this isn't something light. They run those numbers. They have accountants run those numbers, and they say, well, your catalog right now. And for, if your life expectancy is 20 more years, your catalog will, net you $80 million. But if, publishing company says, hey, we want to buy your catalog for $150 million because they look at life plus, it's like, hey, that's a great deal. And those people say, hey, this catalog, my music has done great for me, and I can go do something, invest into something else, or into my estate, into my family, whatever they want to do with it. So some of it was out of necessity, as in David Crosby's case, what he was saying, and others are like, I'm getting up there. What else can I do? This is some can look at it and say they'll make more money on that sale than they will make on any other future royalties. The other thing is, you see these things happening quickly, and this also goes with the Biden administration with the capital gains tax. So I think there's a lot of action that's been pushed through really quickly, because he was talking about the capital gains tax going from, I think it's 30, is it 17% to 13%, or it's 30% to 40%? I don't remember. It's a significant increase in the capital gains tax. So I think a lot of you're going to see these sales, if I continue with catalogs, you're going to see this happen quickly.
There was also something on that same note about the estate tax. Like if they want to leave this wealth to their families, they're better off leaving it now than waiting till after they pass.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's a lot of thought and a lot of reasons and a lot of things that we don't know why. But money it can make a good answer for that why.
I suppose to your point, Peter, that now that they're starting to crunch the numbers, when they were getting portions of physical sales, it was a considerably higher one. But now that they're looking at streaming revenue, I mean, we're being told left, right, and center that they get X amount per stream, and it's lower and lower every time we discuss it. They're probably suggesting that pretty soon it's going to go down to sort of fractions of pennies, and as a result, they're going to be getting less and less over time, and the value isn't going to go up in proportion. So yeah, that does make sense. Good point.
Mm-hmm. All right, so going to move on to Music Business Worldwide here. We're going to move from Music Business Worldwide, and this was in the New York Times. So this is always one that is interesting to people, especially if you go into different territories. If you go around the world and you put on the TV and you say, hey, I love that show from the U.S. It's like, wait, the music's different. This one is titled, Why Don't Some TV Shows Sound the Way They Used to? This goes with licensing issues have gutted the soundtracks of many beloved series on streaming services, resulting in bewildering music cues and missing theme songs. For years, whenever Paula Cole's phone started lighting up, it usually meant one thing: Dawson's Creek had arrived on another streaming platform. The teen hit drama, which aired in 1998 to 2003, was synonymous with the singer's beloved theme song, I Don't Want to Wait. on home video and on streaming platforms like Netflix. However, the series has had almost all of its original music replaced, including, most conspicuously, the theme song. Instead of Cole's Tunes episodes of Dawson's Creek, it now opens up with Run Like Mad by Jan Arden. Audience have not taken this change lightly. Quote, people really care and are upset about it, Cole said in a phone interview from her home in Massachusetts. They tag me in every post. So much tagging on the social, fans tagging Netflix and Sony is prolific. So, it talks about, goes on about Dawson's Creek being one of the classic shows that sounds different. So why does this happen? It turns out it's mainly a problem of foresight. All shows have to pay for the rights to use existing songs in their soundtracks, and the process of licensing popular tunes can be prohibitively expensive. Before the early 2000s and the days before DVD box sets and streaming, producers didn't think much about the long-term future of these programs, as they saw it they would air live and possibly for a few years in syndication. Many opted for a compromise to get well-known songs onto their shows, limited short-term licenses, which allow them to land big artists on the cheap. And quotes, at that point, people didn't think further, said Robin Urdang, Emmy Award-winning music supervisor who had licensed songs for Broad City, The Marvelous Miss Maisel, and said, we're airing the show for a year or 3 years or 5 years, and then it's going away. They didn't think they needed the music longer. So, you talk about like the X-Files, and you hear like with the streaming, and there's like trying to get these relicenses. So like some changes less so, like the music for the shows for Scrubs or Bones have been dramatically altered, and fans have pointed this out. When TV producers want to put a song in a scene, even a small portion, they have to clear its use with the song's composers and publishers and pay them a hefty fee. The costs are considerable, between $30,000 to $40,000 on average for an indefinite rights to a popular song that has played on the radio and that most people would know. And a network and cable TV music budgets, meanwhile, are sometimes barely half per episode. So, I mean, there's a lot more in here. It's really a great article if you follow along with Sync. And the music supervision and everything, what they're saying is like, it's very hard to do this job when you get it right. It's an exciting experience, but to have to later swap out favorite selections over rights issues can be heartbreaking. This one person said, so these limited temporary license could be as low as 5% of the cost of licensed song in perpetuity. That enables a show with low budgets like Dawson's Creek to pack their episodes with recognizable tunes, even if only briefly. No one would be interested in watching these shows in a decade time anyway. That thinking went. So it's really a great article on here. I mean, I remember going, when the first time I went over to the UK, I was in London. It's like, oh, I don't know that show. I put it on. It's like the theme song's different. All the music is different. There's territorial licensing, and there's so much that goes in. I mean, music supervision is not it's not an easy job when there's so much you have to clear, both sides, different territories. In the UK, sync licensing is completely different with with their licensing structure than in the US. So there's a lot that goes behind the scenes. Anybody here that works in sync or has any experience with licensing of this? All right.
Yeah, I can definitely vouch for music supervision being challenging. A lot of it as well. What we found on a lot of projects as well is particularly when some productions want to clear public domain material. It might be classed as public domain or has come out of the is no longer part of the copyright in certain territories, but in other countries it is. So obviously that's a little bit of a challenge as well. I'm kind of glad as well that Martha's joined the conversation. I don't know whether she's free, because she's the music supervisor that we use on all of our productions. She's incredible at what she does, and she'd be able to offer a bit of insight as well.
Martha, you're free. Just hit the invite button if you want to just chime in for anything. I know when I was over at Cobalt in UK, I was working on the sync team, and the challenges, and you never know what you never know what is going to get cleared in the first place, and then is it for it might just be a movie trailer and it's not going to be in the film. It's different negotiations and different territories and different media, and all media in perpetuity. So those were the type of words thrown around. All right, so, Martha, if you want to jump on up, feel free to join us. I'm going to move on to the next article. But first, let's go over and get our weather report. Eli, what's the weather?
The weather. All right. Well, first, we want to welcome all of our listeners in the room, not just on Clubhouse for iOS, but also on streaming platforms across the World Wide Web and around the globe. Welcome and thanks for joining us. Taking a look at your local weather, today's weather report includes cloudy with a chance of takeout. Back to you, Peter.
Takeout, yes. I like that. What was that movie? Cloudy with a chance, 30% chance of
Cloudy with a chance of meatballs.
Meatballs.
It was
That's
a book
it.
first.
Yes,
Yeah, it was a children's book first.
That was it. All right. I don't think that was. I think that was a children's book after I was a child.
And for those of us as the unofficial UK consultant, for those of us in the UK where we refer to it as takeaway.
Takeaway, yes. I remember.
Angela, I actually debated whether I should say takeout or takeaway. I just wanted you to know.
Oh, thanks, Eli.
We look out for our family across the pond. All right, we're going to talk a little about podcasting here just for a moment because it all folds into the Spotify spot as we go into later in the show. And we're going to, again, if you want to raise your hand and join in the conversation, we're going to be opening up the back end for the roundtable just in a second. And if you want to follow along with any of the articles that we cover, go to musicindustrycity.com, click on the Clubhouse Information Center graphic, and that'll take you to the show notes, which has links to all the articles that we cover throughout the week. And this one is Digital Music News. Apple's inking podcast exclusives now, and the Siegfried and Roy show is coming. So, we hear about, you see what's going on with Spotify. Apple's going out there. So Apple has signed an exclusive podcast deal for a show focused on the lives of Siegfried and Roy. Apple is stepping up the game against Spotify's war on its podcast dominance. The Siegfried and Roy podcast will be one of its first exclusive shows in the Apple Podcast app. Apple is slowly making a big push into original podcasting content behind both Spotify and Amazon Music. Amazon will now allow podcast creators to charge a subscription fee for access to content. Spotify announced a similar paid subscription program, but will give creators 100% of their revenue for the first year. Apple's original podcast content has some TV show ties in for All Mankind, but the Siegfried and Roy will be an audio-only experience without an accompanying documentary TV show. All right, so it just goes on. I mean, this is just a quick little interesting to say that, hey, Apple is coming up with original content. And we're seeing these things in podcasts where Warner inked a deal with Spotify for podcasts. And, going to take this and line it up with this other article from Axios. And it was the podcast paywall wars have arrived. So, they've normally been open and freely distributed, but subscription offerings for podcasts from Apple and Spotify aim to challenge that status quo. So between the lines here, it starts as the subscription podcast ecosystem develops, it wouldn't be surprising if other major podcast publishers start to toy with the idea of putting some of their podcasts behind a paywall. So what's driving this is Spotify on Tuesday launched its new subscription platform that gives podcast creators the ability to create podcasts exclusively for paid subscribers on and off Spotify. Creators using Spotify podcast creator platform Anchor will be able to mark episodes as subscriber only and publish them to Spotify and other podcast listening platforms, the company said. For the next 2 years, creators can pocket 100% of their subscriber revenue, excluding payment transaction fees. Starting in 2023, Spotify says it plans to introduce a 5% fee for access to the tool. And this is in comparison to Apple's announcement with its podcast subscription service last Thursday. Apple's new service will include all the tools needed by creators to offer premium subscriptions on Apple Podcasts for $19.99 annually. Apple will take a 30% cut from podcast subscriptions, similar to what it takes for any transaction made via apps within its App Store. That cut drops to 15% after the first year, but it's still much larger than Spotify's fees. So, this is, and, talking about New York Times has had conversations. Times purchased Autumn, a subscription narrated article product. So this is an example of their ambitions. NPR plans to launch a public radio podcast subscription service, which is going to allow listeners to directly support their favorite podcasts and receive sponsor-free versions of individual podcasts for a small fee. So this goes on, and the big picture is the financial return on investment in podcasts fully remains to be seen for most creators. In order for podcasts to grow, for an industry to grow, the biggest podcast companies need to invest in more ways to help creators get paid, which is why subscription platforms make sense. This is potentially good for the creators, but also, we're going into the fight of, another subscription, another subscription, another subscription, and you're competing with Netflix, Spotify subscriptions, you're competing with Hulu, all the streaming platforms, you're competing with HBO, you're competing with other. It's at what point?
Amazon, Audible,
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. So, with that being said, we got into a little Spotify talk there. So let's go into the Spotify spot.
All right, but before we do that, we have the big green dot. It hits the spot. Just before we go into our Spotify spot, I want to welcome everyone to the room. If you're just tuning in Clubhouse for iOS or on streaming platforms across the World Wide Web, this is the Music News Power Hour, where we scour the World Wide Web for all the music news industry information that you actually want to hear about and discuss. The back half of our show, after we finish reading the headlines, is opened up to a roundtable discussion. So soon we'll be opening up the floor to anybody who has comments about any of the headlines that we've covered today, or if we've missed any headlines that you'd like to bring to the table, please feel free to raise your hand if you're in the audience. We bring a whole new meaning to hands up here in Music News Power Hour. So please feel free to raise your hand, put your hands up if you have anything to contribute to the conversation. We're headed into our final headline, and then we're going to open up the conversation for our roundtable discussion. Peter, over to you.
Right on. Thank you for that, Eli. Yeah, so it's What's a Day Without a Daily Spotify Update. And this one is from Billboard Magazine. And it's Spotify's Equal program supporting female artists unveils inaugural class. All right, so Spotify aims to foster equity for women in audio with the official launch of its Equal Music program and inaugural class of 35 female artists from around the world, and who will receive playlist support, marketing, and more for the next year. The program announced today builds off of Spotify's Equal campaign for International Women's Day last month, which included a playlist hub for female artists and podcasters and a 15-member Equal board. Alongside the artist program, the newly announced elements include a suite of additional playlists and the relaunch of Spotify's directory of female creators in partnership with Soundgirls, all with new tagline, quote, women at full volume. Women comprised only 20% of artists on last year's Billboard Hot 100 year-end chart, according to the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative's latest study, with no significant increase in nearly a decade. Spotify Vice President, Global Head of Music, Marianne Dickus, says that as of the largest streaming service in the world, Spotify has not just a commitment, but an obligation to help change that. Quote, it's on us to help the industry shift. Equity in audio is something that is one of our number one priorities, and it really has to be. So the inaugural class was cherry-picked from across 35 international markets, spanning more than 50 countries. She goes on to say, we're selecting people who really showcase the local music scene so that they can be amplified on a global platform. For the next year, Spotify will highlight these artists on Equal local playlists, each of which will feature an Artist of the Month on the cover, as well as a flagship Equal global playlist. Additionally, Spotify will promote the 35 artists with both on-platform and out-of-home digital marketing efforts. And so it goes on, it goes in deeper. And finally, Spotify is relaunching an expanded version of Equal Directory, the global database for female and gender non-conforming people in audio, which was created in partnership with the nonprofit Soundgirls in 2018. The directory, where creatives can create profiles and find work, will now be known as the Equal Directory. So it's really good to see what they're doing, and I know we've discussed here and recently about festivals not having enough female representation on their stages, and that has been a big source of contention and there's been a lot going on in the UK. This is something that is really good to help support, and I want to get anybody's thoughts on this, and that's going to be it for the news read. So any thoughts anybody has, feel free to jump in, and we're going to open up the playground for the next 15 minutes.
It's Peter's Play Place. We're going to open up the round table now for any of the headlines that we discussed today. If there's anything that we didn't get to talk about as we covered the headlines, now's a great time to bring it up. Please feel free to join the discussion and raise your hand. If you're not already on the stage, feel free to join us.
Eli, was there something that particularly stuck out to you?
It's striking to me how much attention is being given lately to equality between genders and equality between trans and cisgendered people in terms of signage, in terms of plays and spins and priorities on playlists, but also in terms of prioritization on festival lineups and what that means for future festivals. And so I feel like that's been getting a lot of attention in the news lately. That's just kind of stuck out to me. I can't not notice that. That's interesting. I don't know if anyone else has noticed that as well.
Anybody else have some thoughts on that?
I'd say I've noticed that. Just kind of a lot more present in dialogue and topics that people are bringing up. It seems like it's a topic of conversation that's a lot more frequent.
I'll tell you the one that stuck out to me was that we kind of went through quickly and it sort of made sense, but now that I'm sort of digesting it, was the article about the short-term agreements for some of these music placements. I mean, when I'm thinking about that now, I'm going back to an era in the U.S., especially where you had channels like WB and UPN, where they had these programs like Buffy and Felicity and Dawson's Creek and oh God, One Tree Hill and Gilmore Girls and all of that stuff. There was such an era then where it was almost the TikTok of the time, where teenagers would be watching these shows, Small World and all of those, and they'd be watching these shows and young artists. I mean, I worked with a handful of them. I worked with Gavin DeGraw for a time, and his placement on One Tree Hill as the theme tune was monumental for his career. So considering that if they picked that show up as a nostalgic sort of throwback for streaming on these platforms, that sadly he may not see any of that money or any of that exposure on the back of it, which is kind of wrong. So I'm wondering if anybody thinks that there might be something that could be that if it's just fair, all's fair in love and war and business, as they say, or if there could be some means by which there's a way to sort of get in their corner and fight for it, or if it may be then a new way for a new artist currently to get that spot and sort of have a similar deal.
Honestly, Angela, I'm kind of hoping in that instance that it will mean that consumers will speak with their dollars and with their preference and with their comments and ratings. And so I'm definitely hoping that it's going to kind of be like when Skittles took the lime Skittles away and made them green apple, and everyone kind of revolted. And, I don't know about you, but I've actually mailed some green Skittles back to Skittles saying that the green ones should be lime, not green apple.
Oh, hell yes.
And I think that it's possible that consumers, when they purchase the DVDs and they're looking for those nostalgic tunes that they recall from certain scenes and from certain themes, I think it's possible that the consumers might say, hey, you know what, this isn't what I wanted. That's not the nostalgic memory that I was hoping to purchase and bring into my home. I don't know.
So there's also there's another thing about those deals back then, and when people start, and artists and people started realizing like, oh, I can get paid to be on TV, and we're like, or it's like if you got your music placed into an MTV show and like you aren't getting, most of them, it's like, hey, we're just going to get you exposure. You get like a 3-second chyron, you have that, and then building it's like, and then it's like, oh, there's an economy here, and then you had the gatekeepers, and it's all that change over time. And then like those shows that the ones that you just listed, but also here's the other thing about licensing the music is, you look at, all those, like any kind of catalog acquisition. So if there's a catalog acquisition right now that is for the masters from some artists from the 80s, they have samples. Think about this. They have to clear all those samples. They have to clear, every right has to be cleared for new medium. Because nobody was thinking anything like, in the 80s, nobody was thinking anything like this would ever happen. It was the CDs. So you also see that there's these songs that might have been placed, and I can speak, from exact experience. I remember coming home, and I was like, I turned on Party of Five or something like that. Oh, no, it was Dawson's Creek. And I just turned on the TV and it was on. I'm like, wait a second. Did I turn on my DAT machine? Because I just heard this song that I literally mixed a month ago. I mixed it. Maybe it's 2 months ago. I mixed it. And I had the master from the band, but they actually already had it sent out. Now that band got signed to a sub label of Sony, which then is no longer in existence. Can that song ever be reused again? But now they have to find another song to replace that scene, because nobody knows who owns the rights. Where is it? I'm like, hey, if you're looking for the master, I have it. Call me. But who owns it? What happens if a label goes under? Where does it go? I mean, if it's under Sony, I mean, you're talking about so much catalog. How does that all work? And then relicensing it.
Surely there should be something built in, and maybe Netflix is quite good with this because they seem to have a bit of artist protection built into their ethos or their sort of business
Their
ethic,
mission
I
statement.
suppose. Their mission statement, yeah. So perhaps there's something built in that says, that this music was used without intentionally abusing the copyright, and will pay, a standard rate, industry established rate, if the correct owner can be found, to avoid getting sued, obviously, but also so that they can keep the integrity of the placement. Because surely whoever it is that owns that, even whether it's the artist or the label has obviously sold on the catalog, would want to only recoup what's deserved to them, or it's late over here, what they deserve from it. But at the same time, it shouldn't be incumbent on that third party that's just purchasing it to chase them down and find it if they're not meaning to connect it.
I love that you said it's late over here. Everyone, that is Angela. She is our UK correspondent for Music News Power Hour here. She said it's late here. That's why she said that. She is tuning in from the UK. She's our UK correspondent. Thanks, Angela.
And it's actually not late. It's 10 minutes to 6, but that's late in my head.
I was just about to call you out, Angela.
Got to go have some more PG tips.
I was up late listening to a terrific NFT drop discussion last night, so don't blame me if I'm a little groggy.
Oh dear.
Andy
Sorry.
wouldn't know anything about that. Andy, how did the drop go? So we discussed this yesterday. Imogen Heap had an NFT drop with Endless, and there was a big announcement. It was in the media, and then it happened. Andy, fill us in just really quickly. Give us an update. How did it go?
Sure, it was amazing. Thanks, Peter. And sorry I couldn't join you yesterday. It was just a crazy day. It was brilliant. It was a really good experience. I mean, crikey, the room hit. The guy who was hosting the room sent me a text halfway through and said, by the way, we're the biggest room on Clubhouse at the moment, which was quite an interesting position to be in. But we had the drop, and then we had a VR after party in this place called NFT Oasis. And then the creator of that place took us around and showed us a few other places. It was just a crazy evening, and it was really enjoyable. Thank you.
Right.
Amazing. Andy, congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Andy. I love it.
But how 2021 is that, to have an NFT drop and then an after party in a VR environment? Is crazy.
I don't remember seeing that invitation, though. Maybe it was lost in my headset somewhere.
Oh man.
I'm all about the VR.
Congratulations, Andy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Actually, Peter, I've got a viewpoint on one of the topics that came up, and I wanted to throw it out there if there's time.
We got 5 minutes left.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, do it.
So this whole thing around podcasts being bought out by the streaming stations, so let's just put it vaguely like that, or streaming platforms. If we start looking at those two different entities starting to merge together, and we go into very, very short form podcasts instead of sort of like a half-hour podcast, what about a couple of minutes? And then we start adding in music. We start getting into the era where we're actually competing with radio. You could actually literally put a playlist together of podcast pieces and music, and you're competing with radio. Now, there's an interesting dynamic that comes up then, because I think we brought this up in this room before, that radio in the US is very different to radio in the UK. So radio in the US, if a track is played, I can't remember which one it is, whether it's performance or the writer, doesn't actually get paid. Whereas in the UK,
in the US, only the writer gets paid.
Okay, so only the writer gets paid in the US. In the UK, the writer and the performer gets paid, and it's actually historically, it's not been a bad way of getting money. So then if you put it in the mid, this kind of sits in the middle, but kind of very much swayed towards the US side of things, that it would actually then be, you would be getting some payment, but nothing like the kind of payments you'd have got if you got a UK radio play. So I was just wondering if anybody had any kind of viewpoint on that, or whether anybody had sort of extrapolated it in the same way as me, that it feels like the talk and the music being put together starts to feel like it's actually going to be a big competitor to radio.
I have some thoughts, but I want to open it up for anybody else that has anything they want to say to that.
Sure, it competes. I've subscribed to a lot of podcasts that are long form music programs, but very nichey. An hour of whatever, deep house cuts or jazz cuts or whatever. And the podcasting world, I think before, did not even recognize rights or royalty payments. So Apple and Spotify are certainly going to change that, I assume. But everything competes with radio. I mean, I maybe listen to 10 minutes of terrestrial radio a month and hundreds of hours of YouTube and Clubhouse and Spotify. So, I mean, radio's headed in the kind of the wrong direction with all this competition, I would say.
So yeah, thanks, Greg. And Andy, to answer your question, so there's two things to just to bring to the table, is the company Stationhead. Are you familiar with Stationhead?
I've been using it. I've been using it now on your recommendation, Peter. I was going to thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Stationhead. I sign up, and I can go live in like literally it took me 5 minutes. I could have been live in 10 minutes, and I actually did my first station because you link it to Apple Music or Spotify. You create a playlist, or you can add songs from your account, and that you say, okay, I'm going to make a playlist. I'm going to hit a go live button, and I'm going to say, hey, welcome to the Music Industry City Monday Music Discovery Show. Come hang out, and then I can start a song playing, and people can tune in. There's a chat window, so they can chat with me. I can have them, they can subscribe to my channel. They can tip me. And when everybody gets played, so if you link, because everybody has their accounts, like to have a Spotify account. So if you're listening to like you are listening to it and Angela's listening to it, and I play something off of Spotify, you're listening to it off of your Spotify. So it actually counts as a play to Spotify. Really cool. So
very, very neat.
Right.
It's dope. It's dope, Andy. Check it out. It's really
that is very cool. Peter, I want to ask, is it okay if we put 2 minutes of overtime on the clock so that I can ask for final thoughts from our panel today on the stage for this Music News Power Hour?
Yes, I can. 5 minutes overtime. 2 minutes overtime. Is that what you said? Sorry.
Yeah. I asked for 2, but
it's going to be
call, DJ. Yeah.
No, 5 minutes from now.
It's your call. It's your call. We just got some final thoughts from Andy and from Greg. I wanted to ask John, did you have any final thoughts for us on any of the articles that we covered today in the
Eli, if I just may add one more to that, because this one,
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. No,
that's
sorry,
okay.
Peter.
It's all good. Yeah, it's the other thing just to add in is, with Spotify, going back to Spotify. So Spotify acquired Anchor, and Spotify allows music podcasts to occur because technically you cannot put out a podcast without properly licensed music. But Spotify is allowing that. So if you create a podcast on Anchor, which is owned by Spotify, you can do that. Now, guess what? Spotify and Facebook, there's going to be a little button down there where you can listen to Spotify music and podcasts from Spotify on Facebook. This is all coming together. This is not something that was just came up overnight. This is years. This is Spotify in 2011, 2010, I guess it was, linking up with Facebook, and people can connect their account. Nobody knew anything. Nope. And I just said, I got in before it was mandatory. I'm happy about that. And I never connected. It is connected in some way. If you want, you can still connect it. But guess what? All of that brilliant move is coming to fruition today. And now with what the audio notes, you're talking about the small, Facebook's going to have audio samples, so you can drop audio notes in somebody's news feed. There is a lot in this space that is absolutely amazing. And again, we actually have the articles. We talked about some of this early in the week, so you can check out in the show notes. But that's going to be it for on the Anchor station head, but check them out. And now, Eli, go ahead and run the room. We got 3 minutes.
Yeah, okay. We're wrapping up this Music News Power Hour. We try to hold it to 60 minutes each day, 12 to 1 Eastern Time. You can join us on Clubhouse for iOS, but we want to ask, John, do you have any final thoughts for us on the articles that we covered today? Real quick, we have just a couple minutes left.
No, nothing new from me, but thank you for the hosting this today. It's been really, really interesting, so thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you'll join us again. We're here every weekday, 12 to 1 Eastern, and tomorrow is our Friday Week in Review, so please do join us again. Alexis, any final thoughts? Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Yes. So sorry, I've been trying to answer some people online right now, but I was just thinking about when you mentioned the Dawson's Creek situation. I started watching that during Corona, and
don't laugh. We're about to wrap up. We're about to wrap up the room, but you and I are going to have to talk privately about this experience another time. We have just a couple minutes left, but definitely ping me into a room soon so we can talk about that.
Yeah, all I wanted to mention was that I noticed that the theme song had changed, and I looked that up. So, yeah, just that I read that Paula Cole no longer wanted to be associated, I guess, with that any longer. But yeah, thank you for having this room. And okay, I'm done.
Oh, it's always great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Please come again. And I'm telling you, we need to ping me into a room. We need to talk. Victoria,
Sure
any
thing.
final thoughts for us, Victoria, as we wrap today's Music News Power Hour?
I actually didn't sent you a note on Instagram, but I actually have to run into a meeting with my AWOL team. So
okay,
hope we'll chat later.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Right
For
on.
sure. Okay,
well,
have a great meeting.
Well, we were talking about Cobalt, we were talking about Sony and AWOL, and there's Victoria.
Indeed. We're looking forward to discussing that, but we hope you have a great meeting. Mike, we get your final thoughts as we wrap today's Music News Power Hour?
No, please go ahead, Victoria. I had no final thoughts to add.
She logged out.
I think maybe she unmuted her mic by mistake, perhaps. I'm not sure. She had to go to a meeting, she said.
All good. Nothing to add. Let's wrap it up.
All right. Elliot, any final thoughts for us?
No, just going to wish everybody a happy rest of their day.
Always great to see you. Thanks, Elliot. Angela, any final thoughts for us?
No, I hope everybody has a great rest of their week. I'm hoping to be here tomorrow too, but so wish me well if not.
I love it. And once again, tomorrow is our Friday Week in Review. That's going to wrap Thursday's Music News Power Hour from the Music Industry City Broadcast Network. Thanks for joining us. To everyone who's listening in on Clubhouse for iOS and everybody who joined in the discussion, thank you so much. Please join us again every Monday through Friday, 12 to 1 Eastern on Clubhouse for iOS and on multiple streaming platforms across the World Wide Web and around the globe. On behalf of my co-host Peter Schwing, I want to thank everyone for joining us and for being part of our discussion today and for tuning in. My name is Eli Window, and we will see you again tomorrow, 12 to 1 Eastern, for Music News Power Hour Week in Review.
Thank you.
I do have one final thing on the Dawson's Creek. So it's in the articles. Yes. Yeah, so I'm just going to close out with this final read. And thank you for that, Eli. And just going to look forward to the Week in Review tomorrow. But I'm going to leave you with this. In the article, it ends, the kind of outcry has produced at least one victory. Sony has apparently conceded to Dawson Creek's fan pressure about I Don't Want to Wait. Cole, who is set to release her 11th studio album, American Quilt, on May 21st, says that she has recorded a new master for the song, and that over the past year, Sony has negotiated with her publishing company to restore it as the series themes. If it all goes according to plan, Cole said, I Don't Want to Wait will soon resume its rightful place at the start of Dawson's Creek on streaming services. They say Sony representatives declined to comment or confirm this development. But she goes on to say, quote, it's wonderful to have waited this out. I feel like it's not just vindication for me, but for the fans and for all the artists. So that's it. That is the update there. Thank you, everybody. It was great seeing you. And I'll see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. And thank you, Eli. Have a good one.
As it turned out, all she had to do was wait.
And on that note, we are out of here.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Eli. Great to see you.